So, all right, good afternoon. Meeting of the Megunticook River Citizens Advisory Committee. And this is a little bit different than some of our other meetings. We're going to have two presentations today and some discussion afterwards. And after we have our discussion and our presentations, if there's time for public comment, we'll allow it at that time. Meanwhile, do you have cards?
I do.
We can pass out cards, and if in fact we find that we're running short on time, you can put your questions down on those cards, and we'll answer them another time then. But
Are you going to fit in figuring out the January schedule too?
yes, we can do that. You want to do that now?
Well, we can, yeah,
Or
before.
we can do it at the end.
Either one.
Okay. Typically, we meet the second Wednesday of the month, which would be January 8th.
But given that we have to have a recommendation for the select
Sure.
board by the 18th of February, yes. We might want more than one meeting in January. Just saying.
All right, well, we can talk about that after the
I
presentation.
think so.
Okay, so at this point, I'm calling the meeting to order, and Audra, I'll turn it over to you for the manager's update.
All right. Let's just come over here really quickly. So I think that we talked a little bit about report or deliverables from the grant, because I think that there's a few people who have talked about a belief that Interfluve is going to come with another report. So I just want to clear up, there isn't going to be a report like we had for the feasibility studies that were done. There's going to be a series of deliverables, and I'm not sure if Mike is ready with that now. I know he's on Zoom. If he's not ready to kind of go through the list of deliverables for this meeting, we can talk about it at the next meeting, so you all have a good idea of, all the different things that are going to be produced from Interfluve at the end of this. But a big component of this grant was actually some of the work that the committee's done. So a lot of the engagement work that you've all done is actually a grant deliverable. And, your recommendation to the select board is also another really important piece that feeds into Mike's ability to move forward with his deliverables for the Montgomery Dam specifically. And Mike, do you want to talk to that any more specifically?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to characterize, for each of the various, study themes or themes under the grant, there are individual deliverables. The ones that are design focused, the deliverables include, for different junctures of design development, they include the design plans and cost estimate and specifications, and then a design report that's specific to that site. And then a couple of the other study themes are more assessment focused, and so those will have technical reports as well that will summarize the analysis and the findings for those assessments. So we're preparing a table of the deliverables and their anticipated timing. So we'll have it available soon. But I'm happy to take any questions. There isn't an overarching umbrella report that is over the entire watershed in the same way. The feasibility study was done in sort of a master planning of the entire thing.
Do you expect to have those by January? Hopeful.
Well, the design deliverables span, not just the Montgomery Dam site, but other sites as well. And so some of those things will be available by January. The work that we're doing, the technical work, it extends through the end of the grant, which is the end of June this year. So selected of those deliverables will be available in January, but certainly not all of them.
will we have any updated cost estimates on the two or three scenarios?
For the Montgomery Dam site,
Yes.
we're not planning to make any further updates to the
Okay.
cost estimates for that site. So the estimates that we updated, this summer that were summarized in that memorandum, which I believe is dated in September, are the most recent and cost estimates, and those are the prevailing cost estimates. There will be another supplemental assessment relative to the buildings around Main Street and that surround the Montgomery Dam impoundment. That will be available either late this month or early January. And so that will be additional information that will be available.
Mike, can you say a little bit more about what would be in that? What kind of information?
Sure. Yeah. So that for those who had looked at the Montgomery Dam feasibility study back in 2019, that was issued in 2019, the influence of the various proposed project actions relative to the buildings. There was a preliminary assessment done at that time, but then there were several sort of unknowns and uncertainties and things. And so just due to the level of detail that was able to be done at that time, and was consistent with that study. So the supplemental assessment that was done this fall was to follow on some of those uncertainties that were highlighted at that time and just take the evaluation to the next level related to what the influence of the proposed project options would be, and then developing, and then in addition to that, developing conceptual cost opinions that would address issues with the buildings as well.
I have a question. If there is a building or several buildings that don't have recent assessments or perhaps missed an assessment, is there a possibility for that building or those buildings to be added to that report?
It's possible. It would require getting back if that building wasn't assessed during this fall. And this assessment was specifically related to buildings along the Montgomery Dam and some impoundment. And so if a building wasn't assessed, I think there was only one building that declined the assessment. And so most of the buildings were assessed at the time, but to add additional buildings would require additional mobilization to get out there and take a look at it. But it's not impossible to add.
Okay, thank you.
And Mike, is that assessment similar to what you would do, for example, if you were having a like a demolition of a building or something where you're trying to establish a baseline to make sure that something hasn't changed in the event of construction surrounding it? Or would there be or would there be a separate, when you got a build proposal for doing work, would that also include a separate assessment?
Yeah, and so what this assessment does is it establishes, it's sort of like a structural conditions assessment of the buildings as they exist now, and then anticipates, what the influence of the various projects may be on the buildings as they exist now. So it doesn't document every single detail of the buildings. It's, and is in particular focused on the foundations and the areas that interact with the river itself. So.
Okay.
Audra, do you have anything else?
That's all the updates we have about the grant.
Okay.
I guess, so Mike did that 23-page conceptual cost memo. And so I was just curious, is there additional information that you were all looking for?
You know what? I think that if I'm thinking of the right document,
Mm-hmm.
before I presented my recommendation,
You got that.
that was the thing I got. My understanding, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it was just in the text of Bina's email. I thought it was in process. So I guess I thought that I may have, maybe other people got that impression too, because I thought it was. So it's fine if it's not, it's a great document. I just, for some reason, thought that there was a piece that it was not completely set yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
there's
didn't
also
want to present it if it wasn't. I didn't want to present it as it was. I was trying to be really cautious about whether or not that was in process or not.
But there have been members of the public who have had that same impression and asked several times.
And are these people that know that
It's
23-page
23-pager.
memo?
More than that.
So I have a summary of the 2024 provisional costs. I mean,
I didn't bring it tonight.
that's what and I was going to ask you or Mike.
So maybe what we need to do is go through that 23-page memo that Mike did and pull out a simpler summarized version of it.
Right, and is that what that is?
I think that this is to me, this is an
That's helpful.
updated version of the feasibility study from 2019.
So
I definitely was under the impression that when we did the presentations to the community, that something was still in process, because I thought that was why we had already received the 23-page memo, but then that was why we pulled some of the price tags off of some of the information, because at least what Bina had said was that some of it was still being
Right.
tweaked. So maybe there was just a miscommunication there, and that was already
Yeah.
done, and that it got.
I mean,
crossed somehow, but-
I would imagine, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong about this, one of the, they will be doing more cost estimate work when we have a recommendation and a design to fully, because he's got, there's a lot more engineering work that needs to be done, but that can't really be done until we have, a design that we're going to move forward with getting to the, what is it, 90% design, Mike? I forgot whatever the percentage is in the grant as a deliverable. So in order to, for him to do that additional work and the additional cost estimates that come out of the end of that, we need the recommendation to move that forward.
Do you think it's just a sequence or a question about like the order of operations, especially when things are going to the voters? And do you feel like you're going to have enough information, as maybe not you, but select board is going to have enough information to put bounds? I mean, if I'm a voter, I would like to know the cost of an option in front of me, or some type of tax implication, or some type of, at least an upper bound.
Yeah. No, we have that. I think it's more of
I think
the,
we have enough information to give a realistic.
we've got way more information
Than we
than
typically have.
most
Okay.
bonded project questions that go before voters. I get, yeah.
Yeah. that answers
I mean, there's definitely refining, and I think there's definitely,
unknown.
he's going to zero in on things when we get closer to it. But by the time, this goes before voters, I'm very confident that we'll have more solid numbers than the vast majority of projects that we put before voters to ask for funds for.
And do you have a sense that we'll have a good idea of the kinds of grants that might apply towards those numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, I think a lot of them, we will have had to have either applied for them or put an application together prior to the vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a cap, I think, Ray, you mentioned that you thought there was an $8 million cap on some of the grants. Is that the case?
I guess I don't really, some of them, the funding announcement hasn't even been made. Like the grant that the same funding program that we're working through this grant now, they haven't even made a funding announcement about the next phase, so.
But it's possible to put together several grants sometimes on these projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a series of different grants that this project would qualify for, and there's actually one, the application's due in February.
Okay.
And it's different. It's with NOAA, but it's different from this coastal resiliency funding.
And is the town working on that application?
We just had a conversation about how we need to get going on it today. So
But that's your intention? the intention.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry, can I just repeat, did you ask if several grants can be applied to our
Yes.
project? Okay, that's your question. That was
Yes.
one of your questions. Okay.
Yes. So if we can piggyback a couple of grants
Yes, yes.
together, that obviously would help.
Yes, okay. I just wasn't sure I heard it right.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
that's,
think you'll find that not only is that possible, it's probable. The most likely scenarios are going to have multiple funding sources. And then, relative to the costs, cost estimation, so far, cost memos, if there are specific questions that people have, if those could be collected, I'm happy to provide responses. And then thinking back to the memo, I guess one area that was not detailed out extensively is sort of like park improvements and things like that. Sort of the way the MERCAC was going, they really kind of wanted to focus on, and when I say park improvements, it's like trails and, things like that, bridges and whatnot. So it seemed like the MERCAC wanted to kind of focus on the primary project moving parts, and so some of those things are not in there, but they're not developed. But yeah, any questions that people may have, happy to entertain those questions.
When you talk about park improvements or trails, are you talking about just Harbor Park, or are you talking about all along the rivershed? So something like the River Walk?
Well, yeah, that memo is just specific to the Montgomery site locus that would, includes Montgomery Dam and the associated area of Harbor Park. Each of the other individual project sites will have separate cost estimates that will be part of those project deliverables.
Okay. All right, thank you.
oh, and I've got a little clarity on the confusion around cost estimates and updates and that kind of thing. So from the FBE, they removed the price tags for, each of the design scenarios from the community meetings, because I think at that point, just in the sequence of things, there hadn't been finalization of the different design scenarios. So, at that point, it was a much broader array of cost estimates for a much broader array of scenarios. So I think at that time, they didn't know exactly which scenarios were going to be shown to the public, and so didn't know which cost estimates to display. So that was the only reason why. It was just timing and sequence. But there are cost estimates for all three of those up there. See, it's come in handy already, Deb.
I know, I'm so impressed. See, it wasn't a wasted effort.
Not at all.
Okay. Anyone else have any further questions? All right, so.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Tyler, I guess you're up.
Sure. So as a business owner deeply invested in Camden's tourism economy and an engineer concerned with the structural integrity of public and private infrastructure, I'm recommending the removal of Montgomery Dam on the Megunticook River. My recommendation is based on the following considerations. First, I believe the removal of the dam will increase the aesthetics of the harbor, the river entry into the harbor, and the current upstream impoundment areas. I also believe that removing the dam will reduce both short and long-term maintenance and structural complexity and expense for adjacent public and private infrastructure. And while I acknowledge the importance of history, storm resiliency, environmental benefits, and potential for fist passage, me personally, I'm primarily focused on the aesthetics and structural improvements that the dam would bring to Camden's downtown and harbor areas. The aesthetic value of Megunticook River as it flows into Camden Harbor is vital to the town's appeal and economic health. Tourists are drawn to the picturesque harbor and the businesses that overlook the harbor, the river, and the current dam and impoundment areas. I firmly believe that removing the dam and creating a nature-like free-flowing river with strategically designed deep pools will enhance the scenic appeal to both locals and visitors. Now, while I do feel the removal of the Montgomery Dam can result in a more aesthetically pleasing river entry into the harbor, I don't believe it's a given. I feel as a committee, we still have much to understand and address regarding the aesthetic challenges associated with the dam removal. I think we as a group probably need to apologize, as I feel this committee has done a disservice to the many locals, including business owners, that are primarily interested in the aesthetics of the river by focusing perhaps too much on fist passage, flooding, and other easily measurable items. And I feel we as a group need to quickly play catch up on the more subjective topic of aesthetics. The biggest challenge we currently have regarding aesthetics is a lack of quality, detailed renderings of what different areas will look like post-dam removal. Many individuals are left with an option of it looks like something that they don't know or what it currently looks like. Only recently have we even had high-level bird's eye views renderings to share with the public. I think renderings and design options need to be created and understood for what the natural deep water pooling will look like during low flow periods and what the view will look like from businesses not right over the proposed channel, but south of that area, places that currently see water that may not. What is that going to look like? Also areas upstream of Route 1 bridge, and what will that look like? From a structural and maintenance standpoint, the removal of Montgomery Dam presents significant opportunities to reduce both short and long-term structural and maintenance expenses for both the town and nearby businesses. Consolidation of the river channel post-dam removal would allow for easier access to mechanical systems and opportunities for more permanent foundation structures to buildings adjacent to the river. Without the dam, ongoing repairs, inspections, and updates to the aging dam structure will also no longer burden the town's budget. In conclusion, if our current situation was flipped and we had a free-flowing river that was entering the harbor, and we here as a committee were considering the construction of a new dam to improve aesthetics, I believe it's unlikely that such a proposal would gain support. Likewise, maintaining the Montgomery Dam does not represent the best long-term solution for Camden. By removing the dam and reimagining the river as a nature-like pooling waterway, I believe we can enhance the town's visual appeal, improve access to the river, and reduce private and public structural and mechanical costs. Also, as another note on Harbor Park, while I acknowledge the need for improvements to the lower section of Harbor Park from the grounding basin to the American Boathouse, these changes should not complicate the Montgomery Dam decision. Instead, I think they should be addressed in a separate process focused on the opportunities such as natural shorelines, tide pools, stepped shorelines, and boat ramp upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Tyler,
Yes.
that last bit
Yes.
about addressing those issues separately,
Sure.
how would you do that? In other words, in what sort of a, who would do it and how would we do it?
I still think it's tasked upon this committee, but I would make sure it's well disassociated from any of the Montgomery Dam discussion,
Okay.
as I feel that any option that would, I think all three scenarios shown up here could be created with Harbor Park being, I don't think one is reliant on the other.
But it would be something that the committee would talk
Absolutely.
about. and-
Absolutely. I think that's part of our purview as far as when we talk about the whole Megunticook River watershed. I would just treat it similar to recommendations that we're putting together for Powder Mill Dam or other sections of the river.
I think what's hard though is if you do take the dam down, it's going to impact Harbor Park definitely more than any of the other two scenarios.
Yeah, and I think I would just, I guess I'm treating maybe even Harbor Park in different sections.
Mhm.
I'm kind of looking from the grounding basin to the American Boathouse
Okay.
as one area, and then perhaps what's happening adjacent to Montgomery Dam.
Okay.
I think what would be happening to Harbor Park adjacent to Montgomery Dam would be affected by all
Okay.
three scenarios. But I think there's been some confusion within the public about when things have been added to different scenarios, perhaps over adjacent to American Boathouse, and someone says, I like option B because it shows a
Grounding
boat
ramp.
ramp over by the American Boathouse. Well, that's not, unfortunately, they're getting distracted by something that I think was not the intent.
Not connected. That's a good point.
I think that that's part of the difficulty with what you were talking mostly about aesthetics. And I think that that's been the difficulty all the way through, because I agree that it would be really helpful to have more drawings from lots of different angles, especially low and high flow kind of situations. But there's so many of those pieces like River Walk or how you design around that are still sort of nebulous. And so I worry that anybody would get married to what something looks like without it actually being, with it still being up for discussion. So I think that that's sort of difficult for me to wrap my mind around a little bit in terms of how we would best meet that goal.
I agree. I think it is super difficult, and I think interpretation of it is difficult too, as far as what someone finds aesthetically appealing.
Right.
Is a tricky thing. I think we haven't had a lot of discussion about, I think about areas that are currently impoundment areas that would go away. We haven't had a lot of discussion about, what that could look like. Is it bare rock? Is it trees, or do people have access to it?
Right.
Are there structures there? I guess we haven't had a lot of discussion about what even the options are.
Right.
But I mean, I believe that there's opportunities there to make it more appealing.
I agree with that.
And I'm excited about it because I think there are areas right now that, there's areas you stand in the park right now where if you stand there and try to look at the water, there's an 8-foot high stone wall in front of you.
Right.
To me, I wouldn't look at that and be like, oh, that's beautiful. It's just, so I think there's areas that can be improved.
Mhm.
Tyler, if, I'm trying to think, you're supporting taking the dam down,
Yes.
but what do you have in your head? Things other than the deep pool, nature-like, things that you think would be important to be included in any next or final rendition? And I'm thinking part of what's poking me is what the business owner's concerns.
Sure.
What could happen up there that would be better for them in face of a loss?
I think it would be good for us. I mean, we certainly have, there's 3 or 4 businesses that currently overlook the falls and impoundment. And I think we owe it to them and their constituents to give them an idea of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't know whether you had any particular, or not even exact, but some ideas about what might be done.
I think one of the biggest concerns that I have in that area that, I mean, this river, you know, I think that's the conversation I was having last week was that it's going to be nature-like, but it's going to be highly engineered. And I think one of the things that's going to be really important right now, when you have low flow on the river, which happens a lot, the impoundment holds water. And so when you go to the back of those businesses and you stand there, you see water, even though not much water may be flowing down the river. I think it's important to figure out how you can achieve a similar effect with a free-flowing river, and it's maybe with pools or something like that. But I think it would be nice when you still went out on those areas that you still had some relation to, oh, there's water there. It's not just, you're not looking down and seeing a dried up riverbed.
But are there things other than water that could be aesthetically pleasing?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know totally what they are, and I think it would be good to discuss. And maybe it's more engaging some landscape architect firms or understanding what some of those areas could look like. That might
Just
be
what's
different.
possible.
Yeah,
Well, and I think also just asking some of the business owners, do
Right.
they
sure.
have some thoughts, and it may be hard for them, but even showing, like when we look at the different fish passage options or seawall options, sometimes if you have 2 or 3 different things, do you like something like this? Do you like something like this? And at least show those options to people and say, are these the kinds of things that maybe would work for you?
Sure.
or
I mean,
would be-
and it's hard to figure out what those would look like, but I mean, you might come out on the back of those decks and you have a free flowing river and you have a wildflower, you have flowers and you have.
Right.
And I think
stuff
that
that's-
Mike Burke did talk about already having some plans in terms of, and not necessarily specific to Montgomery Dam, but in terms of planting natural species so that invasives don't come in. And I think that was already part of some of the work that they've done, but maybe something we should look
I
at.
hope something that's better looking than the island right now.
Right.
Well, yeah, I was actually, as we were talking about this, thinking about that, because if there's not the reflection pool, and then there's not this south-facing cascade, the island at low tide is no longer an island.
Well, it has one of the scenarios, I think it's C, I think it is C, has a neat little sort of green area there.
Right, yeah, I mean, it is like intentionally.
But you're saying
green.
that there's no water.
Well,
It's
I'm
not
just saying
an
there's,
island.
if at low tide, there's no water coming over that side, then you could potentially be accessing it from the public landing. So I think that would be something I would personally be thinking about, because you have people who could maybe be accessing now sort of like near under those buildings. How does that sort of interaction work? And I think that would be important. I mean, I'm sure that some of them don't want people under their buildings. So being intentional about sort of that
Public
barrier.
access. or
Yeah,
what it looks like,
exactly.
or- Yeah.
Yeah, and making it beautiful in the process, but really kind of thinking about how you delineate that public space from their personal space.
Or much like the pictures that I showed you from Calgary. I mean, can you plant some natural grasses that are water, that are water tolerant, and something like that, that at
Absolutely.
least looks like it's a shoreline or a wetlands area that might bring in some birds and might bring in other animals.
Yeah, and I think that would be, we should be doing that intentionally with any kind of project like this,
Yeah.
because you're going to want, I mean, even just for the sake of stabilizing the shoreline, you're going to want intentional planting. So
But it could even go the other route, which is it may not be wild plantings. It may be an intentional garden. I
True.
mean, you go down to, the botanical gardens, and there's a lot of areas there that may not be native plants, but a lot of people go to the azalea garden or places like that it could be a different feature.
Maybe we could get one of their people to come up and take a look.
I mean, for the same reason that, like Camden Garden Club does plantings in the islands, and
Right.
there's a reason that we probably don't use native plants for that, and it perhaps doesn't stand out as much as.
However, it'd be a
non-native
great
plants
place
are.
to showcase native
Exactly.
plants. I mean,
Sure.
that would be a great way to showcase.
But I think those are, I guess, to me, these are some of the discussions that I think this group should still have. If we are going the route of recommending removal of the dam, I think we owe it to people to really understand what that looks like.
And also, I think it needs to have some monetary costs to it, because you can have installation, you can have maintenance, if you're putting in gardens or you're putting in walkways or whatever, you're talking about maintenance costs of those long-term over 50 years, which we've used as a baseline. So that has to be part of
Absolutely.
the recommendation if that's where it's going.
Yeah, and a place where my own thinking connects with something you said about the aesthetics. I began worrying about not eventually what it would look like from those decks, but during the year or two of construction, it would be good to give some thought to any moderating, mollifying, some sort of, to make it look less like a disaster site. And that's not anywhere near my domain, trying to figure that out. But I think it's a question worth thinking about and seeing whether we can generate, together with the owners, it's not going to be gorgeous, but could we make it less awful?
Tolerable.
Yes, that's all.
Less awful.
Less awful.
I have two things.
Yeah.
One is a comment, actually three things. One's a comment, one's a question. My comment is, I think it's really interesting you went down the aesthetics route, because that is the subjective thing. And definitely the reason I steered away from it, because it turns out flooding is also subjective. So it was really interesting to hear you specifically go for that particular angle. Because I think it's problematic. I mean, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So that was just interesting. Also, I'm really thankful to you for talking about that other section, the grounding basin to the American Lighthouse, because that's been a little fuzzy for me. Like, where do we stop and end this project? And then the other thing is, I was sure that you were going to be in favor of a compromise solution. And
I was curious myself. Yeah.
I'm curious what, or if you were, maybe I was wrong with that.
I like the idea of a compromise solution. I don't think I've figured out how to do it and look good.
Oh, okay.
I was
Right,
concerned
the
with a lot of the
fish
aesthetics
passage.
associated with some of the highly engineered fish ladder structures.
Yeah.
Looked like highly engineered fish ladder structures.
Totally agree. Yeah.
My concern.
And while it's an interesting feature, I don't think that I would necessarily stand on the knoll looking
Totally agree.
down at it and say, wow, that's
Gorgeous.
gorgeous.
Well, you know, it's interesting, at the public events we had, there were very few, I think out of the two, there were 7 people who wanted to like B. But in the end, what they ended up saying was, well, I want a fish ladder, but I also want the falls. So I guess I don't know.
Right.
But very few, it was really bifurcated, the vote. But it was interesting, because I thought, despite the fact that it has that compromise appeal, for exactly the reason you mentioned, they couldn't make themselves like what it looked like.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's hard, either you want to save or restore the dam, or you want to take it down. You know, the options are,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
you.
Feels like it's not quite either
One of the ends, right, it really misses sort of on both.
and costs a lot to do
It
it.
costs a lot to do
Yeah.
it. So
Right.
that, for
And
me,
maintain.
that was
What's
like,
to like?
what's to like about it? I mean, there were parts of it that I liked, but
I like the idea of a compromise, but
yes.
No, I mean, that's what I pointed out in my statement last time, is that, I came to this hoping that there would be a good compromise, but B is not it.
No.
Mhm.
It is not it. It never will be.
No.
Same thing. I said mine the week before, though. But I think, no, but your process is the exact process I followed.
Yeah.
Geez, it'd be nice to find something that allows everybody to have a little bit of agency in this entire thing based on where they came from. And I just don't see that anything, either the exact B we came up with or any other conceivable B would make anybody happy.
Tyler?
Yeah.
Through this whole process, you talked several times about creating some type of a pool up behind what is now, the dam
Right.
and everything. Did you consider that at all as one of the aesthetic improvements, not really a natural improvement, but an aesthetic improvement that you would push for?
I think it'd be great if you could get some standing body of water up there. As part of, and I think Courtney was talking about that last time.
Yeah, that it confuses me a little bit because I don't understand how, I mean, maybe if you had a wall, I mean, to me, what I see from the Harbor Park would then still be a wall. How would you be doing a reflecting pool without the wall? Because to me, that view looking like into town matters more to me than the view from eating my lunch at Camden Deli. And it feels like one's so much more specific and honed in versus like, how would you be able to do a reflecting pool up there without there still being that sort of sense that there's a structural thing?
But could it be the corner of the dam? And that corner perhaps is a resting pool that's part of the natural river. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
we
not
talk
saying
about-
I'm against the idea. I'm having a hard time envisioning what that looks like exactly
But I
without it
just wonder
also
if you
looking
could
in
do
here.
that up at the top, leave the corner of the dam and use that as part of maybe a resting pool for fish. I don't know.
I think it would be a smaller element than the current reflecting pool
Mhm.
is right now.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I'd love to see someone, a landscape architect, doodle around with things and play
Right.
with stuff. And I think is it possible to do something? Is it possible to have something that's tied to the river further up? And so the river flows down one side and it has natural banks on both sides, and there's a pool that's higher up that might be still cascading down or
Right.
um,
Well, that's another question I have because I agree that having lots of renditions and lots of conversation around what it might look like would be amazing. But I also don't think that that is any of our skill set. So I don't know. I mean, I can definitely dream up lots of things, but I don't know that they are feasible. And so I am curious how we would achieve, like, how do you see the process of achieving that with us not personally having those resources?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, I think we need to leverage. I guess I've probably been a little disappointed in the rendering process that's occurred so far with this, and maybe it's us. We need to get better direction, or not look as for a finished rendering, or somehow streamline that process so we could get quicker iterations and more iterations. And I mean, these are great, but they're also they're so far away that I can't even see what's going on.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it would be
They
nice to
tell
be
a
like
very
a
high-level
drone that where you
story
can
that,
like fly up it and see
um,
what it's like.
So I'm not sure what that, and it'd be interesting to work with Mike, who's done this before, or other people, or maybe even other people who have worked on similar projects to understand their process for getting that iterative process associated with the aesthetics aspect.
I think one of the, what you brought up is aesthetics. I think one of the problems with those drawings is that it's not the view that anybody really sees. And what people look at where the dam is either from the public landing or walking up on part of the wall where they're not supposed to be, or from parts of
Are you not
Harbor
supposed to
Park.
walk on the wall?
Or from Harbor Park,
The
or,
decks.
Or the decks of the businesses.
or from the decks of the
Not aware of
businesses, or from the walkway over at Lyman Morse. That's really how people view,
Yeah, you're right. None
What
of
the
us are up there in the
waterfall
sky
is
looking at it
and
like that.
everything.
Totally right.
and
Or on a
that's
schooner
really,
coming in.
those are really the views that the people have of what is now the dam in that area.
Yeah.
And you can't see what it's going to look like in any one of those three drawings up there.
True.
And I think that's a hard thing to sell, that aesthetically it's going to look great without the dam, when that view of everybody has of it is from those perspectives.
Sure, and I think a great example of that is I think even the library board from our even just the second rendition of this. I know the first rendition they said well, all three of them are awful, and then I think when they got revised, there was an iteration that said, oh, we like
This is better.
this is better.
An improvement.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
But those three scenarios, the emphasis on those is on Harbor Park and not really the dam and the waterfall.
Right.
Or the water entrance into the harbor.
Yeah.
And that's what's really wrong with those three, because you're conflating the two issues.
So that seems like really good feedback for the people.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
maybe
change
we
the
haven't
angle.
been asking
Yes.
the right for the right,
Yeah.
Right perspective, right
Perspectives.
people, yeah.
yeah.
It's so funny because I feel like we got so bogged down in that whole process with those people asking us questions.
And none of us
But it was
picked up
also,
on
but
it.
it was following their lead. We
Yeah,
never had this conversation.
I was very
I didn't
easily
even
distracted during that whole process. I'll just advise, but
You're excused, Rick.
thank you.
I hadn't even thought of that at all, Ray. So I hadn't even thought of the fact
No,
that
but
it's
I
not
definitely
from,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
so-
and have at least two versions from the harbor.
I wonder if
From
there's
the-
any AI that we could use that would, you could put a photo in and say, remove the dam, move the river over here and see. I hate AI personally, but it would be helpful in this situation.
Take it back.
There's a joke about
I know, I'm like totally against it every other way.
drones flying over our country right
Right
now.
now.
Right.
That's actually the photo they would take.
So maybe that's where it came from.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great perspective. So you're up.
Now for something entirely different. I did a little explanation. I did one recommendation, mapped it out pretty much along the lines that you all did, what things you looked at, and then bringing the scientific and other data and perspectives to bear on it. And I thought, my God, I've already heard how many of these? And I thought, I don't want to do that. So I did something different. I'll be talking about the same features, factors, but from a different point of view. So bear with me. This is not woo-woo stuff. It's not new age. It's just a different perspective. Instead of being mostly focused on scientific data, it looks at some of the more humanistic, if you'll forgive me, perspective. So my fellow members of this committee have done a thorough, articulate job of explaining the reasons for selecting Scenario C, dam removal, using science, engineering studies, the experiences of other similar projects, and their own good thinking, as well as other resources to reach a decision about the Montgomery Dam. All the while, I'm looking at you, Ray, all the while listening to community members and taking those views into account. They argue, and I'm with you, that this choice will best prepare our community to respond to the challenges of the future, including the inevitability of change and its unpredictability. I agree with this decision along with the reasons for it, and there's not much I can add to either the evidence or the reasoning they have brought to bear on this question. I see the benefits across the categories we looked at, like economic impacts, flood risk, historic significance, education, project funding, aesthetics, resilience, and more. While I considered the same facts and came to the same conclusion, I have additional thoughts about the decision. Thoughts that emerged when I looked at some of the factors through a slightly wider lens. So in what follows, I will share some less scientific, maybe more humanistic possibilities about aesthetics, economics, education, and so forth. I will inevitably refer to some of the thinking you have already heard. Hard to avoid when you're last in line. Aesthetics. See, I put that one first, Tyler. There is no question, as others have said many times, the falls are lovely, both to see and to hear. Opinions differ, it must be said, on the aesthetic qualities of the impoundment. Without denying or discrediting this, with a fully restored river, there will be many more beautiful places, offering different aesthetically pleasing sights and sounds. And while the harbor will no longer have a falls, it will have water moving downward over rocks, providing new and varying patterns of sunlight and sound. Additionally, in the harbor and possibly many other places, this beauty will be physically accessible, not just visible and audible. In other words, the aesthetics will be more immersive and multisensory, not just pleasing to the eye and ear. Economics. We have heard many times that Camden is a tourist town. While I think that description ignores many other things that are notable about this town, it is clear that tourists comprise a major source of business income here. The growth of this source, without additional new attractions and activities in town and the harbor, is likely to be limited. But we're not limited to what is there now. A fully restored river can attract new and a more diversified group of tourists, as well as community members, not only in the center of town, but all along the river itself, reducing our reliance on a few Main Street businesses and the sailing trips. People who want to walk along the river, who want to photograph not just the falls, but also the free-flowing river and native plants, fish, wildlife, including birds of all kinds, that the restored river would attract. Also, others who want to sit and do nature journaling, fish, fish, where I lost it, or just find a picnic spot of their own. If some of these people are from out of town, they will probably want and need to eat. So there is no loss from the traditional businesses that I can see. In fact, the opposite, more activities, more people, more business. Surely people eat in town because of the food itself, not just the view. Education. A fully restored river, heaven calling, a fully restored river with a path along it and or other points of access can be an outdoor classroom, a fresh air environment in which children can explore and learn about the natural environment that surrounds and supports them, about all the non-human things and beings in it and how they relate to each other and to us, all of which can lead to a fascination and appreciation, even a love of that world. This response forms the base of a stewardship or caring relationship with that world that is important to its survival that is important to our own. Allowing the Megunticook to once again be a free-flowing river returns it to the more natural state that drew people here in the beginning and can inspire curiosity about that earlier history. So history. Leaving the dam in place honors one relic of one period of Camden's history. A fully restored river honors something like Mount Batty that has been here throughout the town's history and stretches much more deeply into the past, including more people and more human activities. The record of these peoples is thinner and harder to find, but we know they were here and likely had as rich an experience, albeit in different ways, as we do. Why would retaining this one material artifact of this one period of history matter more than the many possible benefits of restoring the river? The one thing that stretches throughout the area's entire history, the common thread through all periods of that history. Allowing the Megunticook to once again be a free-flowing river honors this long history rather than one relatively short part of it. Finally, removing the Montgomery Dam allows us to do what Siona Ulbrich, the central person in 5 successful restoration projects, told us such projects should do: reach way back into the past and far into the future. And as the director of 5 successful projects on the Vagaduce River, she would know. Flood risk. We keep saying we need a definition of flooding in order to talk sensibly about it. So here's my try. A flood occurs when any amount of water that overwhelms the land and infrastructure designed to contain it, and in doing so threatens or causes loss of life and property. We all know that there are 3 high-hazard dams at the base of the lake. We have also recently heard that even if and when these dams are in good repair, there is still the possibility of water overflowing them, being unable to keep the water back. with all three of the major dams between the lake and the harbor and their respective impoundments in place, there is very little place for the water to go other than places that will cause damage or worse. As Parker Gassett said, first and foremost, we need to give more space for the river to flood and ebb naturally. During heavy rains, the land along the river should act like a giant sponge that soaks up the rain and slows down the peak flow of the water moving through the system. Flooding occurs when the sponge is too small or at maximum saturation. When a dam maintains a higher water level, the sponge is already full. It can't absorb any more water. As long as these dams are in place, we have very little protection from a storm that would challenge the high hazard dams or overwhelm other structures designed to contain it, if we leave those three other dams in place. Stakeholders and the ecosystem. The arguments both for and against the removal of the Montgomery Dam focus for the most part on benefits to us, partly to the fish, of course, but they are valued by some as part of the benefit to us. It seems to me we need to widen the lens to include all of the stakeholders in the decision. Defining stakeholders as all those who will be impacted by what we decide to do with the Montgomery Dam. We need to recognize that we are neither the masters of our future nor the victims of our future. We are active players along with others in that future. We live in a connected world, a world of wildly different things, some animate, some inanimate. Birds, bugs, microorganisms, plants, light, rocks, water, mammals, fish, us, and more, all of which affect and are affected by the others. It is this complex and interconnected web that provides all of us with the ability to survive and, in the best circumstances, to thrive. Every time the web is broken, this ability is diminished and some things perish. I ask you to think of all those small life forms living in the Montgomery Dam's impoundment that die every time the impoundment is drained, thereby denying those creatures that depend on them for food and other needs. To ignore or deny this, to me, is folly and endangers us and all those who depend on us or are affected by what we do. If you have any doubt about this, learning what is known and has been said about ecosystem functions and services would be helpful. Removing the Montgomery Dam and the other dams under consideration recognizes that this interdependence is foundational to our resilience by restoring the diversity and balance of vital elements that we need now as well as in the future. Moreover, restoring the connectivity of the river and people's connection to the river can provide a number of benefits that increase our ability to adapt to changing features in the surrounding world. And here I'm thinking of things other than weather and environment. And the need to find alternatives to those activities that are threatened by and possible to provide more public spaces and trails, new school curricula and activities, new fishing opportunities, deeper connections to the natural features of the watershed, new tourist and other economic opportunities. It has done this elsewhere and can do so here. Critically, it recognizes all stakeholders and what is best for them, thereby sustaining and strengthening the web, the connected elements of biodiversity upon which we all depend. It recognizes the role the ecosystem has in our resilience and makes the health of the ecosystem a focus of our attention and concern. And finally, this decision, whether it is to keep the dam or to remove it, provides a model, sends a message to our children of how best to determine what is best for the community. Whose welfare do we consider? What factors are important? Who is involved? How broad are the intended consequences? What time frame do we use? What values should inform this decision? Right now, to me, one decision seems to more value a narrow focus on the present, maintaining things as they are, and part of the past, just the industrial history, and also on fear for what can be lost, perfectly understandable. The other value is a longer, pre-industrial, wider understanding of stakeholders and new possibilities. While recognizing the emotion, especially the fear, that often accompanies change, but also the sadness at losing something loved. It expresses faith in our creativity and responsibility for those coming after us and hope for the future. The question posed here is, which message and example do we want to give our children? In the words of Terry Tempest Williams, the eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time. They are kneeling with clasped hands that we might act, leaving room for the life that is yet to come. Thank you.
Wow. Nice. That was poetry.
Bring us to a different level.
It was long. Sorry about that. But you can tell it was from the heart.
Very clearly.
It came out of the head, but it was from the heart. And it's clear that those are issues that resonate deeply with me. And I think they are important. That's why I started up by saying I don't consider this woo-woo stuff. You know, I'm not asking for.
You mean like the entities being more than just the people involved?
It's not just people.
Yeah.
And I think most of us know well enough that it isn't just people. We depend on that web. And we lose attention. We stop paying attention at our peril, as well as at the peril of everything that will suffer because of what we do. So that's just additional things to think about.
Well said.
Deb, thanks for, thank you for talking about the acoustic aspect of the falls. I think that's an important thing that we've
It
heard
is.
from a couple of, especially property owners that are adjacent to it.
Yeah.
That's a big aspect. So probably it's something that I didn't address in the aesthetics, and I think there's some sort of acoustic aesthetics that would
Absolutely.
be good to try to maintain.
I think
That's why I took that video
Yeah.
during a very dry period recently of water coming down just on the right-hand side, because you get the auditory as well as the visual. It's really quite lovely.
I was going to say that when we went down and drained the impoundment, that was actually the first thing I noticed when we went up on the bridge and there wasn't standing water in the impoundment, was the ability to hear the river coming through town, which I had never heard before. And I guess maybe it wasn't as noticeable to me at the falls because I'm used to it, but to be in town and hear water coming through was a new experience. That definitely was the first thing that sort of registered for me. So I definitely think there's a way to still.
Well, there is,
Have
and
that.
you know, and if you walk along sections of the river, and you don't have earplugs in, you can hear it almost all along the river. You can hear it. And it's as much of the aesthetics as the visual, watching the light play. It's magical, I think. So it's as you said, Elfie, you know, aesthetics are very individual, but it's beautiful sound in either case.
Well, I think you especially hear it in that section above the Main Street Bridge up to
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah.
Which normally it's, you don't hear that. When the impoundment's been drained, you hear that
Yeah.
water through there.
Right. And yet that was, I found, the most striking memory I took away from when we visited the Powder Mill Dam ruins site. When we were just out in the woods there, and I think, this doesn't feel like the same river.
Right.
But I meant it is the compliment. I don't know if that's the right
Feels
word,
kind
but
of wild.
very positive
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And if that sort of flowing and that auditory, aesthetic piece, you know, if we get that all the way through, it's,
Really amazing.
yeah.
So I have to ask you all, I mean, what I said doesn't give you a lot of places to dig in. So is that kind of approach in talking about these changes helpful?
I think it is. I think you were able to articulate definitely some of the things that I think and feel, and move away from the facts, which certainly the facts matter, but I do think having some sort of emotional appeal is important. And for me, you talked about sort of the accessibility of the river, which is something I've thought a lot about and not been able to really put words to. But I think right now what we have is this river that goes through town that almost nowhere can you actually access it. You can't walk down to it. You can't really interact with it. And the idea for me, especially an educational opportunity for children to be able to go down and have that environmental learning opportunity is really incredibly compelling to me. And I think, especially having done Montessori during COVID, we really focused on all outdoor education. And so I did a ton of research on that at the time and was really sort of blown away to find that outdoor education is beneficial in all the ways that you can imagine, but it also equates to higher math scores, higher reading scores. I mean, it's incredible in the way that it actually impacts the well-being, the mental well-being of children. And to me, that's a really incredible opportunity that I would love to see.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I taught river study, and it was amazing. The kids who didn't necessarily do well sitting in a seat in school, they were amazing
Absolutely.
out in
Yeah.
the field. And we went out 3 times a year. And I also had some of the high school kids teaching some of the younger kids. It was 3rd and 4th graders. And you have that interaction between those two and getting out there and being in the water and looking for animals and birds. It's a whole different environmental education.
Right.
Is really.
Well, and right now, you know, the kids at Montessori they work with herring gut to raise salmon and bring them to their natural river, which is 40 some minutes away. And that's what they do every year. But wouldn't it be really cool if you were raising ones for your own river and you could go down? I mean, it just, to me, there's endless opportunity there. And it's really cool to think
Well,
about.
Seth, you know, I mean, you walked down at the tannery and picked up rocks and, you know, what's underneath the rocks? What are the things that can be
Right.
used for fishing?
Totally.
Deb, do you think, how do you feel the industrial past, if the dam was removed, how do you feel that should be honored or should it not? Or do you see sections of something remaining? Do you see more educational plaques? Or is it just a phase that isn't addressed as much, or how do you see that?
I don't think we ought to ignore any part of the history. So the best way, the question you're asking, the best way to hold on to it, which recognizes what it did, good, bad, and indifferent, without, because you're asking me, having that memorial, if you will, interrupt a natural process or system. So it's possible. I remember the select board meeting where the 2 middle school kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's
Good one.
that's
Right.
happening.
is
We're going to
happening.
put signs, and then in the projects we saw in the panel discussion where they had done that, I thought it was well done. And I think in some cases, that's enough. A picture of an old building, or it could be a picture of the dam, and some indication of why that was important. I just don't think that was, I mean, there's a saying, particularly in literature, about current writers standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before them. And I see the people in Camden today, the business owners, they're just as important. They're standing on the shoulders of the ones that came before them. So I don't think we need a dam, but I think some sensitive and engaging, in fact, the library could even have something. I'm thinking of videos and stuff about the industrial past, but in 1 or more places, maybe along the river, maybe a couple where there was a dam, just some sort of an introduction to the history, just where the stones came from and what the mill produced. But I don't want to see that at the expense of the natural world, because I think we overemphasize certain things that human beings can do to the detriment of the ones that human beings don't control. And that has a big impact on kids.
I have something to add to that. I know a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was a while ago, maybe it was when we did the public meetings. There was somewhere out there some comment that said that people thought it was insulting to reduce this to signs
Mhm.
along the river. And I gotta say, it's at first I thought, and then I thought, actually, ironically, right now you could walk through Camden and never have a sense if you didn't know how to read the dams in the river and everything. You wouldn't know. I didn't know at all until I was on this committee the breadth of the industrial use of the river. So ironically, I feel like that signage or whatever creative thing people can come up with would educate people more about the industrial past of the river than there is now. So I just want to say that. And the other thing I want to say is that your aesthetics angle is a really great thing to add on to the economics. And I keep going back to the bottom line of money. If we hadn't been leaning in the direction of, if you were trying to say to me, we need, incredible Ferris wheel of a dam down there at the river, because that's going to be a beautiful thing. I would be like, I don't care about the aesthetics, because I'm really concerned that Camden is an affordable place to live. And it's not, so I don't want to add to the tax burden. And that's been a major concern of mine as I've looked at this. It's really important that Camden doesn't just become priced out of, it's already getting there. It already might be there. So I think your aesthetics angle just reinforces what is already, I think, the best economic decision for the town, because it also does what Terry Tempest Williams says. People will look back and say, thank you. This is what should have happened. Yeah. So that's just all I want to say, is that if you'd been arguing the other way, I would be like, I don't know. But it's actually,
I'm so glad.
It does. It's true. All of it's true. Everything you said is true. And even if maybe, I don't know, if it were a little bit of a cost more, maybe I would be saying that piece also is part of it. But anyway, just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that could be done is the Historic Resource Committee, they already have a mill walking tour. And there's no reason why we couldn't do that, talks about what were the dams that were here, what were the mills that were here, what is the history? And perhaps that could be a business for someone too, to do a lantern tour or whatever, and to talk about the history in Camden, and whether it's the schooners on the river, in the harbor, and the
It
dams.
actually might be
and
more
industrial
interesting
history. Yes.
to have that tour without the dams there. Because I can see people scratching their heads and going, what?
Right.
How did they do that?
Yeah.
It would.
Could be a kayak tour.
Well, there you go.
What did you say?
I said it could be a kayak tour.
One comment really, and it's really not directed at you, Deb, but many people have made this reference and everything, but you said something about a fully restored river, and it never will be a fully restored river as long as Seabright East and West dams are there.
Just said free flowing.
Right.
I just said free flowing. Didn't I?
No, you said fully restored, but yeah, and it's really a free flowing river below the dam, those three dams. And I think that's one thing, however, recommendation is made by this committee, and I know I'm going to be outvoted that way, but that really is one thing you got to be cautious about, because it's really never going to be the original Megunticook, or whatever you want to call it, from the days of the Wabanaki here, because there are dams there and they're going to remain there.
Well, and it reminds me of, what was the young student's name? Haley?
Oh,
The quote you
Hallie,
had.
yes, Hallie Arnold,
That change is the nature of the river.
river.
So
Yes.
you're absolutely right. Good point, Ray.
Yes.
Absolutely right. Scratch the restored word.
What?
Scratch the restored word.
I'm curious about and maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit here, but as we move into the next step, there's clearly a divide in town of people who are for keeping it and for removing it. And I'm curious about how we convince or engage in the conversation with the people who really want to keep it, because there is all of this information available, and there's still the thought of let's keep it, maybe in spite of that, or maybe they're not fully aware, but it seems like there's enough information available at this point to be fully aware. So I'm curious how we engage shifting people's minds on that when it is so emotion based. I mean, some of this we could get blue in the face with facts, and to some people that's not going to matter. And so, I mean, I think your approach was sort of in line with, I mean, you definitely pulled on my heartstrings, but I already agree with you. So I don't know how well it would work with others, but that's definitely been on my mind a lot, because a lot of the conversations that I've been in with people who want to keep it, so much of this information doesn't resonate or matter or even affect their thoughts on it. So I'm curious.
Well, maybe it's not the information. Certainly not. That's maybe not where you started. In fact, I would say, no, that's not where I would start. I would start with questions for that person to try to figure out. I mean, I don't think I'm naive. I'm too old to be naive, but I am a believer that if you are genuinely curious and you keep at it, you can find common ground. Now, the common ground may not be taking the dam down,
Right.
but you will find common values, and that gives you something to work with. I don't know, for people who are like this, la, 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 I don't know how much value can come from trying, but I'm always willing to try. Because
Yeah, I'm
curious.
willing to try for sure also. And I think I do take the approach that you're suggesting in terms of, I mean, my sort of, motto is to try to find something, some commonality.
Well, and just make sure
but-
you understand what they're saying and why they're
Right.
saying it.
Well, I'm not sure I always do
but
understand
that's-
what they're saying or why they're saying it.
No,
I mean,
but
that's part of the problem.
That's why you keep at it until at least you have the feeling that you do understand. I mean, even though we are all speaking English and using some of the same words, we don't mean the same things by them.
Right. I mean, I feel like we can all be looking at the same information and have
And see something
Love with a
different.
different.
So on the
yeah.
point of compromise, it may not have been the compromise that anybody had envisioned, but it does represent a compromise that some people have lost a beloved structure on their landscape, but the community wins in the compromise overall. And it's the whole community, as Deb described. It's the natural community and, the human community and the community
Educational,
of
yeah.
downtown businesses and the
Yeah.
community of upstream businesses and ocean businesses. I mean, it's, it really is
It's
like,
not discounting anybody.
it's not discounting. It's really taking the opportunity to thank people for their compromising spirit.
But I think
in a sincere way.
that's a little where some of my conversation was going, because I do believe that there's a lot of different factors associated with why I think people want to keep or remove the dam. But I think aesthetics is a huge one.
Yeah, no, I
And
agree.
I think there's a lot of people that like what's there. They're comfortable with what's there. And unless they're shown something that could be better, and it's hard to just hypothetically say it could be better.
Right.
And it's very hard to
Or at
convince
least as
someone on
good.
that. And I'm sure that, I think a great example of it is probably, I wasn't involved in the discussion, but when the library expanded to the underground portion, I'm sure that there was a table that sat around like this. And there were people that did not want to do that because they were concerned about this historic structure that sat on top of the knoll.
Right.
It's been part of their town for as long as they remember it. And I think if you were to approach people today, there's probably still some people that feel it was a bad choice. But I think there's probably some people, I think most people would say at this point that the asset that it brought by expanding that underground was some sort of a compromise to expand the library and provided new opportunities. And was there some aspect of that, the aesthetics that was lost? Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, there were trees up there that had to go away. The stone facade changed. But I think, I'm sure in that case, the same, they struggle with the same issue. And
Yeah.
I've certainly seen models that were made of that one to probably help try to sell that and let people understand what that looked like. So I think it's, as much as people debate about whether there's fish or not in the stream, I don't think that's a huge factor
Yeah,
for a
I
lot
agree.
of people that are interested in keeping the dam, even the historic aspect. I mean, I think the dam was changed anyway by Mary Louise Curtis Buck. So it's kind of like, it's not really the dam that was there when the anchor mill was there. It was already kind of changed a little bit. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different aspects and bullet points, but I think aesthetics is a huge one for individuals that are interested, and they're concerned, and rightfully so, about what's it going to look like. And I think Ray brought up a great point, is not what's going to look like from a drone. What's it going to look like from the harbor? What's it going to look like from the park? What's it going to look like from
The decks of the business.
the decks of the businesses?
Totally.
How am I going to interact with it? What's it going to look like? And to be honest, you know, in my head, I can envision what it's going to look like along Harbor Park. I'm very excited about that. I could see,
That's easy.
I could see rocks. I could see my kids being able to go down and interact with the stream. I could see pools. What's it look like from the other side? I don't know. And I think,
Especially that cement channel.
yeah. And I mean, I can very easily envision what it looks like on the back deck of the Smiling Cow. It's going to be beautiful. It could be a beautiful flowing river right underneath the Smiling Cow. Now, as I migrate south of there, each deck is getting further away from that now consolidated river channel. I have a hard time envisioning it. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to those business owners and people, and to be honest, to people that are going to be utilizing those businesses they want to go out and have a nice experience in the back deck. And I think that's kind of our goal too.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's really,
No,
Yeah.
so I think we owe it to them to really figure out what some of those areas look like.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I think the biggest, well, what I hear about the most is, are the falls going to be there or not? And that is a tough one. That's going to be a tough one, because I think that's where it's going to be very different.
it's still water running over rocks.
And there's a lot of elevation drop.
There's a lot of.
No matter what we
No, I
do,
get that, but it is,
no matter what we do, it's tumbling into the harbor.
15 feet
Yeah.
from,
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's 15 feet. That's.
it's not nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to be different from.
Yeah,
what
it'll be
I'm-
Yeah.
certainly different than a.
So I think it's,
There will be
A
no
veil.
water, excuse me,
Sorry.
there'll be no water flowing over the south portion towards public landing.
Right.
that's true
Okay.
too. Yeah,
Which-
that's true.
You know, most people, and I'm saying visitors here, okay, if they're going to see the falls, they see it from the public landing. They really don't go over to Harbor Park to see the falls
Okay.
as they exist now. So that's what they see, and it's just going to be ledge. That's all they're going to see.
Well,
there.
no, but
No,
we
not
talked about doing
necessarily.
something else.
I know, there are possibilities there.
I think the ledge is also beautiful, though,
I do too.
personally.
Yeah.
I fell in love with granite.
Haven't we all?
Is that part of it?
In there, I don't think. I don't
No, I spared you the 17 years.
Oh, to
How do I
granite.
love it?
I did, but getting close to rocks, I mean, they are
Okay.
beautiful.
Gorgeous, yeah.
Brian Swim says they sing, but I haven't heard that.
Two questions, and not totally related to, not both of them related to this. One, and it's just something that I've had asked. Once we make a recommendation to the select board, what happens with this committee?
I have that question also.
Well, Tyler was signing us up. We're good.
I mean, I think
The
we were, I think we
landscaping.
were tasked with, the McGunnicook watershed, not necessarily the
It seems
Montgomery
like- it
Dam.
seems
So I
like
feel like
step
there
one.
are,
Other projects.
I don't think we necessarily tackled the low hanging fruit. I think we tackled one of the hardest issues, which is Montgomery Dam. I think there's other hydraulic structures along here that we can provide recommendations to the,
Yeah.
Okay.
And depending on what that decision is, and if it moves forward, it would affect everything else. But it doesn't mean nothing will happen up the river.
Right.
but I think
would
it's a
not
great,
dis-
I think it's somewhat tied to, I believe
what
you're right,
happens.
that I think it is
Yeah.
tied to Montgomery Dam.
Sure.
So.
Right. And my second question was, what happens if the citizens vote to keep Montgomery Dam?
Yeah, that's another good question.
That I think is, we really, what really happens with the whole process of what we've been
You mean
working on?
us? What
and with the-
happens to
well,
us?
Not just us, I mean, for the town, the whole project. I mean, that is,
Well, if they keep it, there's still the upper river to talk about. I
Right.
mean, the Montgomery Dam coming down is a key to doing the whole river project. But it doesn't mean, I mean, that would be the opening question for us, is what remains for us.
what
to
else can be done?
do.
What can we get funding
I mean, I
for,
can tell
whatever.
you, if the town voted to keep the Montgomery Dam there,
Mhm.
then I think we absolutely have work to do from the grounding basin to the American Boathouse.
Mm.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then
Okay.
I think we probably need to assess upstream of that, whether there's anything that needs to happen there for, I mean, we don't need to focus completely on fish. I mean, there's other things like storm resiliency and
Well,
some other
flood-
aspects.
flooding.
Yeah.
Right.
So there may be other
Right.
things to do
Okay.
upstream that could be, and even providing recommendations for like the east-west dam. I know that with regard to making those structures perhaps more flood resilient.
We just might have to pay 100 cents out of every dollar out of town money instead.
Only
Right.
100 cents?
Yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking about is how, if Montgomery Dam stays, then the funding for any of that is no longer. I mean,
But I think that's important for voters to understand.
Yeah.
That if the dam stays, that most likely it will come out of Camden's pocket, and that also things up the river will come out of the
Mhm.
taxpayers' pocket.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. I think a lot of people look at the dam and go, oh, yes, I want to keep it, but do they really understand that by keeping it, that there are consequences to keeping it?
But that's what those cost projections, why they're so helpful. Because you can look at,
Right.
if it stays, this is what it's going to cost.
Mhm. Yeah.
Best
plus,
estimate
plus a
right
couple
now.
million for upstream.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And maintenance.
Right.
Yeah.
But I look, the costs of the ongoing maintenance costs for the fish passage at the upper dams is not outrageous. I'll just put it that way.
No, but building any fish passage, which is hard to say,
Mm-hmm.
on any of the upper dams is expensive.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
and Audra would have to tell us whether, if it's creating fish passage, even though the Montgomery Dam is still there, if we're going to have fish passage at those dams, so where are the fish going to come from?
Yeah, why would we be in pursuit of fish
No.
passage
No.
upriver if there's
No.
still Montgomery, there's,
Yeah.
it's, it would be an imaginary fish going up because they couldn't get into the river in the first place.
Well, then they would live forever.
So
They live forever in my mind.
I feel like timeline wise,
Should-
this discussion would be after we do it, we craft our recommendation piece, then we start thinking about what we're going to do.
Yeah, and that's, the next step actually is figuring out how we want to do that. Bina has sent, there's a draft / model, something, recommendation. And one possibility is for maybe 2 members of this committee to look at that, but to look at, and we now have, as soon as I get Tyler's, hard copy. They can look at the hard copy of all of the recommendations of the committee members and sort of side by side with what Bina has sent. And I've said this to Audra, the last thing in the world I want is for us to do an endorsement of whatever she wrote. So
Right.
it has to be ours,
Right.
but it would be 2, maybe 3 members of the committee would look at those sets of documents and come up with a draft for the rest of us to look at.
Okay.
And it's a matter of, I mean, if you think that's a good idea, then we just have to get the volunteers to do it and figure out some dates when we could get together in January and talk about it.
Audra, would you look for this group to provide any recommendations on wording for the warrant article?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
And have you seen, we had this discussion, I think when you weren't here last time, and that was a question about, do you feel it, like, if the warrant article was to recommend removal of the Montgomery Dam, would there be a description of what a no vote would imply
So,
and a cost associated with that? Could you do
Yes,
it in
so
such a
in-
manner that,
you know how when you vote on warrant articles, you have the actual, question itself and then an explanatory note?
Mhm.
And so, we would look to you to recommend the language for both of those.
Okay.
And in the note is where you could put that level of detail. And I think that, I forget what, it was actually a Maine municipality, I think it was Farmington, maybe, the way that they worded it, I think it was really descriptive. And so that might be a good one to look at.
Yeah.
But that's the second step, right? I mean,
Yeah,
step
the first is
actually to
definitely,
create the recommendation itself.
but I think our recommendation should include a basis for the recommendation, but also
A
a
draft.
recommendation draft warrant.
Ah,
article.
okay.
yeah, I think when you get to the select board, you're going to want to show them both. So,
Got it.
present your high level recommendation, give an overview of the report that sort of backs up the rationale for it. And then also a recommended warrant language with explanatory note.
I mean, because the interesting thing is, I think if you word it correctly, kind of both things are on the ballot. Like you're kind of actually including dam removal and then dam.
Yeah, everybody's
restoration.
aware of kind of what the
Right.
alternative is.
Right.
Just as long as we don't make it one of those double negative
Oh, yeah,
questions.
no.
Yeah.
No,
I
always
have a
so
copy of
confusing.
the Foxcroft one that
Uh-huh.
gives the explanation.
Hmm.
And I mean, they say very definitely, a yes vote means this and
Oh,
a no
great.
vote
Oh, that-
means
yeah, that'd be-
this.
Mhm.
And, plus a copy of their article of the
Itself.
warrant.
Yeah.
So to me, that was very helpful to look at it because it was a good explanation. Whether we'll get voters to be able to read that explanation is the question. But what it also says at the end of the warrant is that the select board and the committee, which would be our MERCAP committee, recommended voting yes for this. So at
Right.
least you have that.
Right. Oh, yeah. A lot of them have like the eight in favor, one against kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
The consensus of,
Right.
Audra, would it actually put into the warrant that this committee recommended it, or would it just be the select board recommends a vote this way or not?
So I don't know if you've all noticed the last election, they took off because it used to be like planning board
Mhm.
Yeah.
recommends
Right.
5-0,
Yeah, yeah.
select
Yes.
board
Right.
recommends.
Mhm.
They took that off.
Yep.
I did
Um,
notice that because I always vote for that.
And that's something that they debate that every single election.
Mhm.
The reason they took it off this time was because they felt like it biased voters.
Mhm.
And they thought if we put a item on the warrant, people should implicitly know that the select board is recommending it to them because
Oh.
our job is to either put things on the warrant or not put things on the warrant.
But it doesn't require a unanimous vote.
Right.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Exactly, yeah. And for a lot, I mean, and this is totally their prerogative as the select board. This is their ultimate power. They get to be the gatekeepers of the warrant.
Right.
I have heard feedback that it is helpful for some people. If you see a 3-2 vote, it's like, okay, I better look at this one a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a little bit more
right.
closely.
Right.
Right. It is
And
helpful.
so why is it that they felt one way or the other? Yeah.
Right.
However, that's their prerogative and they chose not to.
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
So what about meeting in January? Are we willing to do more than one?
Yep.
I think we
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rick.
Yeah.
Because January is all that stands between us and
It could be, we don't need absolutely everybody. I mean, could it be a small?
No, I think a small group to come up with the draft
Right.
of the recommendation and,
So would that be between now and,
well, I don't think we ought to make anybody do it over.
I don't have to do it on Christmas Day?
No, you
Thank
don't.
you.
However, the day after Christmas.
Get it together.
And I'm guessing Courtney, if she were here, would be interested in,
Yeah.
I don't know what her work schedule allows her to do. But if that's something that could be done, the first week of January or by the end of the first week, then we could plan 2 meetings in January.
Right.
'Cause typically, our next meeting would be January 8th, if it's the
Right.
second Wednesday.
It'd be the second Wednesday, and then we could possibly meet the week after that, or 2 weeks after that. And then there would be at least one meeting possible in February if we needed it, but we might not. Depends on what you and your helper come up with, Helen.
Okay.
So is
I would be
anybody
fine with,
else-
I would be fine with 2 meetings at
Is
least.
anybody else interested in helping with the draft?
Oh, I am.
Okay,
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
okay,
I'm
so,
always, I can edit in my sleep, so maybe the later stage.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you'd be great for the leaders.
okay, so the 2 of you could at least get it started
To you and him? Oh,
and
okay.
have
Sounds like it.
something to share with us by the meeting on the 8th.
Okay.
That sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. What, will we have what Vina has
Yeah,
already?
I'll send that
prior
out
to that?
tomorrow
Okay,
or
yeah, yeah,
tonight
yeah.
even.
You're not, so you're not on that committee? I felt like you were, I felt like that was a given. You just usurped yourself right out.
No,
So now,
no. I mean, I'm happy to help. I'd be happy to do
Ex
that.
Okay.
officio.
Drone.
Right, exactly.
I'll hover.
Wait,
So I'm
January
sure-
8th is when you and I would get together? No, January 8th
that's
is
when,
we.
that's when the next meeting would be. So we would have to get together before
And
that to
Audrey, can
put some
you
things
get us
together.
this room on January
Yes.
8th? Okay.
Yep. And I can also help,
Yeah,
yeah, just
So I'll,
because of language. Yeah,
and
why don't,
curating information you might want to
gotcha.
put into
Yeah.
it.
well, I'll send the Bina one to everybody. And then I'll send an email, Elfie and Ellen
Okay.
to set up a time for us to meet sometime after the 1st.
Sounds good.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So January 8th, what time were you aiming for?
4:15.
So if we meet on the 8th, I mean, do people need, like, if we're going to give it to Rick to edit?
It would have to be before the 8th.
Right.
So
It's not a finished product that would come to the meeting on
on
the
the
8th.
8th? Okay, that's all I want to know.
We're doing 4 to
Right.
6 again, or 4:15 to 6:15?
4:15. That's partly out of consideration for you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So it would be 4:15 to 6:15.
Give me a sweet
I-
45 minutes before going to school board.
There you go. I have 2 questions. One, do we need to make a vote on this recommendation? And we've all given our personal recommendations, but should we be voting on the fact that that's what we're moving forward with?
We could, yeah. I'm just assuming that,
I mean, I'm pretty sure what the result would be, but just for formalities, I didn't know if it was
The
necessary.
vote can simply be that this is the one we're going to work on.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I move that we do some preliminary drafting of a recommendation to remove the Montgomery Dam.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Done deal. Thank you.
Opposed.
And then I have a second question, completely unrelated. John Groves put online Ray's recommendation on the Camden main page. And in response to that, there was request that other people's recommendation also be shared in writing. So I shared my own because I felt comfortable with that. But I wanted to ask others if you're comfortable with having your written recommendation put online for people to see.
I'm comfortable. I need to get mine out of Keynote, and like I didn't really do finishing touches to it, so I'll fix that and then.
Well, the other
I'm
thing,
happy
Ellen,
with it.
that they are now that we've all given them, I was told that they're going to be put on our website.
I agree, and I know that, I mean, people can watch the videos, they can look at our website, but
Facebook is different.
there's so many people
I
who are not
understand.
going to take an extra step to do that, and so because it had been asked, may we see other people's recommendations? If everybody's comfortable with that, I would love to put
Which is
other
pages and
recommendations.
pages and
I know, well,
pages.
mine was too. So, I mean, everybody did or did not read that novel. So, which is, up to them. But I think if it's consistently in that place, everybody's comfortable with that, then people can see it at least in that format.
Well, so maybe the thing, if people are comfortable having theirs put on Facebook, send them to you and leave it up to you to
That's fine.
sprinkle
Yeah, I
them
can.
as-
Because I don't know how to do anything on Facebook.
Proofread it one more time too.
Yeah, I'm not sure I love it always, but I think it's helpful to engage.
Well, it's gotten quite active is what I hear.
You
Because
could,
I'm not
it was
on
an
Facebook.
interesting
I'm
morning.
not-
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have been complimented very highly.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Well,
that.
And
Not by all.
I unwittingly got sucked into the Facebook local discussion group, not about removal or anti-removal, but just the sloppy reporting that has been taking place about this. The only article that's appeared in the Mid-Coast Villager so far basically treated the last meeting as if it was the only meeting.
I know.
Right, only 2 people made three
I
people
haven't
made a
seen-
recommendation.
Oh, sure.
yeah.
And,
Mid-Coast
and
Villager.
with all due respect, Ray, you got 5 paragraphs and Courtney and Ellen, I guess, you were kind of smushed into one, right? So it was,
I had nothing to do with.
I know you did. I know
Well,
you
I thought it
did.
was interesting.
But it just
I didn't even
seems
know there
so-
was an article.
Until the very end.
It's upsetting as a former reporter, especially because, like many moons ago, I reported on the same kind of fight in a small community, only it was Damascotta, when there was a proposal to replace the cute old Scadomfa library with a gigantic glassy structure, and it divided the town, and it sounded very familiar to me. But I remember at the time going to every one of those horrible meetings and listening and reporting, but that was part of the process. And we have not benefited from any of that.
No, and
No.
actually I had a
That's really
conversation with Holly Anderson, and I don't know whether she's still planning. She was talking excitedly, animatedly about how bad the reporting has been.
And that's the
And so-
executive editor.
I know, but she used to be
Right.
a reporter, and so she is willing she's going to look at all of these meetings, and I'll send her a copy of all of the recommendations. She wants to write a story herself, based on the meetings, not just on the recommendation.
That'd be great.
That would be nice.
So it helps to fill that gap. For a paper that reformed itself in order to be a civic talking place for issues that were of importance to the town. Did you not know we were meeting?
And I get
Didn't invite.
and I get the state of, paper journalism nowadays is not what it was. But, and I mean, like cash wise, but nevertheless, it's like the whole response seems to be, oh, great opportunity for an op-ed then, isn't it? It's like, no, I have a job, it's,
I'm busy.
and I appreciate what Penn Bay Pilot does, but that also relies on volunteer writing. And it's just,
Yeah, no.
I'm glad that a lot of people have that time and energy, but yeah.
No, it's been frustrating.
Yeah.
Because the news about this process has all been hearsay, Facebook, and confusing to people who are genuinely neutral,
Mhm.
trying to figure out what's going on.
Mhm, yeah.
There's been a lot of good feedback about having the 3 scenarios at the library.
Yes.
And we did move
So many
them
people have told me.
upstairs when Santa came, and it was interesting because
What
they were
did Santa think?
downstairs.
Bless
Yeah.
That's what
So
That's right.
they were moved upstairs, and it was interesting because Lynn Ennis, who is often up in the reading room, said that it's been a totally different group of people who are looking at it.
Oh,
So it's great. We've had a lot
As
of people
bad
that
as they
come in.
are.
Well, we've had a lot of people come in, with story hour, and a lot of younger families and
Right.
people
Oh,
checking
right.
out books. And then we've had people who come in and work upstairs in the reading room. So that has been a
Ms. Amy
very,
do it like an interpretation for her kids or?
Yeah, right. She can build them
Maybe
all.
we need 2
Okay.
sets.
Well, yeah,
If anyone.
maybe should we put one in the town hall of the 3 scenarios?
Sure.
We have 3 easels we can borrow from the, okay.
Is there an
Can we reprint?
opportunity for education during the upcoming vote? With the scenarios? How are people voting? Are they voting in the town office?
Yeah, I mean,
Like on the wall beside?
I'm trying to
Voting
remember what we said because we can't vote in the fire station.
For the school bond?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, sorry, I don't remember.
I don't know, just maybe, like you said, if you have stuff up in the town office, that might just be people going past it.
So
You're trying to figure out
It
where we're
is-
voting. You're saying-
Yeah, and if you're gonna,
Yeah.
well, I mean, there'll be space somewhere, it just might not be.
Gotcha. It might be like in here or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is 6 o'clock, and I'm just wondering if we have anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment at all?
Ask a
Question?
Ask a question?
Yeah, hi, Philip Conklin.
Do you want to, we'll hold it for the microphone for the fine people on the internets.
Thanks. Mike, Philip Conkling. My question is, your point, Ray and others, everybody agreed you need more renderings from different perspectives. Is that going to happen?
I mean, it's really a budget question, and I'd need to figure out what I struggle with is if we de-scope money from other project tasks to do more renderings, it's just gonna make us not be able to meet some of the deliverables that we originally had put in our grant application, which will have ramifications for when we go to apply for additional, the next round of funding to actually do construction.
So,
So I
if
just
we
need
were
to-
going to do it, going back to an earlier part of this conversation, it doesn't seem to me it would make sense to do another set without at least this group talking about from which perspective do we want them and how much detail do they have to be fully comparable, rather than having, I don't know who would do it, a new rendering, go down that rabbit hole again without any guidance from us, since we seem to have a pretty strong opinion about what would be better.
Sorry.
I mean, what I'm hearing is that if we go for more drawings, then we're not meeting what we already said we were gonna do with the budget. So it feels to me like the answer is it's not really feasible.
I would say, so just today, I had a conversation with Mike about additional rendering work. And, because that's another, there've been a lot of different, like the desire to see different visuals of different scenarios from different angles. There's other things that have come up. So, one thing we thought that there was an appetite for scenario A with a fish ladder. However, coming out of tonight, I think both Mike and I need to reassess whether there's any value in that at all, given where the committee's recommendation is. And is it more important? Because I agree with everything that Tyler said. I had many of the same frustrations about the rendering process and what we got out of it. And because just the desire for visuals has been really the only thing I've heard since 2019. We want to see what it could look like. We want to see what it could look like. So I guess that's got me thinking that maybe we need to look at just not doing some of the other things that were on the list of requests and really just focus on different perspectives
Well, if
for
we just focus
scenario C. Sorry.
on C,
Yeah.
and perhaps do just some pictures of some of the options that could go in certain areas, would that be a effective and less expensive way to go?
I don't quite know. This is all, we have to go back to the landscape
Okay.
architect and, kind of try to explain it. And then they have to try to estimate how long it's going to take them and get a price and then figure out, okay, where can we pull a little money away from and that kind of.
You know how there are
process.
drawings in the feasibility, not the feasibility, in the story map? Are
Yeah.
those things that could be easily altered or specifically altered to our needs now? I don't know. 'Cause they are there.
Yeah,
There
I
are
think so. I think I know exactly what you're talking, like the sliders.
Yes, the sliding
Yeah,
things.
yeah, I think so.
Maybe it doesn't help.
Definitely. I think
is the
more of what
consequence?
Tyler's talking about and what it seems like all of you want is like, okay, so we've got scenario C. What would scenario C look like if you were standing, in Harbor Park to the right of the dam, like you're standing on the
Right.
new bank? What's it going to look like?
Yeah.
If you're standing on the public landing and looking out over it, what's that going to look like? If you're standing on the back deck of a business, what's that going to look like? So that's something I think what I need to do is Mike and I need to go back and think, okay, well, from these different perspectives, if we were going to ask a landscape architect to render what they would look like, what's the cost of that? And can we comfortably de-scope another
Yeah.
task?
Take
to-
off the laundry list.
Right,
Take
if
some
the
out.
story
Focus on,
map is a
just
really
focus on
interesting- yeah.
C,
Yes.
just
Yeah.
that one.
Well, yeah, I think we should definitely do that. But what is the consequence of not meeting the other deliverables?
Right.
So it's, it would be things like the sites upriver,
Mhm.
getting to a certain, 50% design at the lake dams or 70% design at Knox and Knowlton. And we would be less competitive for funding for, construction in the next phases of the project if we don't have that design work done.
Right.
to
See,
that
I'm not
level.
sure I'm not sure that's a worthy
So-
trade-off.
But
No.
maybe I'm a pessimist, but I don't know whether.
I'm just saying if we can't find money in other places.
I don't
to-
know if we don't have renderings. I mean, we're going to put together a document with a recommended warrant article
Yeah.
and a basis for it. And part of that basis, I think, needs to be a visual aspect. And if you don't have those, you may not convince your select board to put your recommended warrant article on there.
Well,
In
and
which
you
case, it's all irrelevant.
Or the same with the voters, because I
And
really,
absolutely,
say, you
I'm
might
like
not get the
absolutely with
voters.
the voters.
Yeah.
So I think,
Well, yeah, and I'm not suggesting not having them in some way. I'm just kind of trying to determine
But what
if
I'm
there's
saying
maybe
is
some
that-
other creative way to make this happen that doesn't put us at risk of losing funding because we haven't.
But
done
you
what
see
we
what I'm
said we-
saying? Like, if
Oh,
you-
totally. No,
if,
but I'm
if
like.
you can't convince, if you can't put the appropriate, if you feel like it's going to be more aesthetically appealing, and you can't make that argument to the select board, and you can't make that argument to the voters, I don't care if you get to 50% on the design for Seabright Dam fish ladder because it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Right, no,
right?
I'm 100% on board with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
But you
if
don't
there
want to
is a
sacrifice one for that.
consequence that is maybe substantial to not having those other deliverables, is there another creative way of coming up with this that doesn't necessarily remove so much of the budget that we compromise that? I don't know what that is. I mean,
Or are there
do-
pictures from other dam removals? In other words. up
right,
in
or if
Megunticook.
we're looking at the storyboard and can we alter those a little bit to make them,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know that any of us have like incredible artistic abilities, but like sit down and.
No, but this town has incredible
Right, there's,
artistic
I feel like
ability.
there's gotta be
I've
a way
said that
to
since
do
the
this.
first conversation I had with Audrey. I can't believe there isn't at least one talented visual artist.
Well, you need a landscape designer person too. That's
Well, yeah, but at least start with someone who can, I mean, that's all they did with those first visuals for us was just a sketch.
Mhm.
well,
Right.
I think before we get too nervous about all this, I think Mike and I can, because I completely agree with everything you said, Tyler. It's just so consistent with everything we've heard from since
Right.
this started. It's just a thirst to and I guess I guess I'm a very visual person because I've always been able to picture it in my mind what it would look like. But I guess a lot of people that's just not, and that's okay and it's understandable. And they want to see what it could look like. And, the more that we can do to give them possibilities, I think the easier the conversations are around it. So I
Yeah.
think everything that you said is really valid. And if we can figure out a way to come up with funds to do that without hurting our ability to, come through with those deliverables, then.
Right.
So we'll go and look at that and then I'll circle back with everybody
Great.
about it.
Okay.
Are we comfortable going past 6:15? Because I
No,
think.
I know you have.
No, I'm fine, but I have nothing to do between now and 7 o'clock.
Right.
No, I was
Which I'll be
just.
another 2-hour meeting.
Yeah, right,
Right.
right.
Can
But there,
No, I
there
just
are
wanna
some
make
other
sure
com-
there's-
but
yes.
if we're going to continue this conversation before inviting others to speak, yes, I'm fine.
No, I was going to say, let's move on. So any-
Thank you for that question, though.
Yeah.
Clearly it needed to be asked.
A very elusive answer.
Is there a mic?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
or actually just, they're portable, so here, just grab one.
Thank you.
Got it?
Hi, I'm Rick Daniel, and this is my wife Signa, and we are both from Harpswell. Part of why I came up this evening was what you had spoken about, was the reporting that has gone on, and what I feel is lack of information. And if I believe anything, it's that people can make more wiser, more solid choices if they have that information. What I want to speak on is what has been reflected by a couple of people here. And I have it written up, and I'll leave it with you all. Well, Warren. A couple of you have touched on this. I've been following your meetings, and well, I'll just read it. As I said, we're from Harpswell, and we've been frequenting Camden for the last 20 plus years. There are many reasons why that I could give you that why we come here, but basically we just like to be here. We enjoy walking Camden. We usually park at Heavenly Threads or somewhere close to Serendipity. It's mostly about pedestrian navigation and starting points, but some shopping does happen. I have served my town and community on the board and committees, including 6 years on our select board and 5 years as its chair. Currently, I serve on the board of finance for my church and for the local fire and rescue. I give you that just as some background. In 2019, YouTube recommended, of all things, that I watch a Midco solid waste meeting. Yeah, but a rather beautiful one. So, the cooperation between the 4 towns that I watched, it was just absolutely commendable. Since then, I've watched many of the Camden Select Board meetings, as well as regular meetings, and including yours. Advocating for or against dam removal is not an intention of mine nor my place. I am, however, moved to the point to point out a component that I felt had been missing and only recently started to hear about it, which is great. Started to hear about it through Rick Thackeray in his presentation 2 weeks ago, or a couple meetings back. And what he spoke about was public access in the Riverwalk. I have and continue to ponder this prior to and since. The potential significance of what it could mean for Camden, I believe, is immense in terms of safe passage. And this would be to be able to pass through, as you've mentioned, Ellen, up through from the Harbor Park and from the town landing. And theoretically, someday you can go from those areas near to the junior high school and maybe only cross Knowlton Street, as you probably already know. What this would do is reconnect those areas in a new way to Washington, Mechanic, and Knowlton Street parking, and to civic and business entities in the area. And I believe that this deserves, in my opinion, a larger discussion among the select board and citizens of Camden prior to your June vote. And I know your purpose of the MERCAC is to provide recommendations to the select board for preserving, improving, sustaining the resiliency of the Megunticook River and its watershed, My only suggestion to you in this fine committee is that when you organize your recommendation, if it's possible to structure it and add a small paragraph on other findings of interest, which may include this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. This topic.
The topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tony Grassi from Camden. My only, I had the same question that Philip did, so you've covered that. The only other thing to mention, and you're talking about press coverage, I got a copy of something called civicsunlight.ai. If you all don't know about it, you should. And it's a guy named David Mortlock, who I don't know, but I've since corresponded with because I complained about them using AI to report on meetings and getting it completely wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
And so just in the vein of, how do you get sensible communication out to the public?
Yeah.
AI is coming after us, and he was very responsive and constructive, and it's an experiment and all of that. But if you just got this out of the blue and read it, you would have thought this committee made a decision 2 weeks ago with no context, background, history, anything. It's pretty remarkable stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad at least some of you have seen it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And
Yeah, it
ag-
seems to highlight all the wrong things.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and thankfully the school bond is being reported the same way. So I might have expressed my feelings about that on Facebook too.
Interesting. Huh.
So one final thing, do we want to show with show of hands where we're going with this on?
I think
I
we
think
did,
we
didn't we?
We did.
Did that? Okay.
We
fine.
did that. No,
And
All right, good.
one other question about the sort of where we're going thing to the larger question that what's our lifespan as a committee look like? And it occurred to me, I don't remember, do we have bylaws or something that,
yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
We have
do
revised.
they contemplate our sunset or anything like
No.
that? Or?
They don't.
Huh,
Nothing helpful.
that would have been
I
easier.
think, I
wouldn't it?
think the conversation at the beginning was about 2 years, but I think that was
Yeah.
as firm as it was.
Over that.
Yeah, yeah, so,
So I think we're done then. right?
yeah.
Longer than that.
About 4 months over.
Yeah, so it might be worth having a more
Serving on select board.
structured conversation, right?
Serving on select board is only a 3-year term.
Right.
All right, well, if there's nothing
Thank you.
else, then I move that we adjourn.
Okay.
Okay.
Right on.
All right,
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Deb, I guess I'm your co-chair of the next